Together? Oh, I am a child of love, come into my being, my mind in the love. Like all the lightning be my God, but you did it, and I do the love of love. I couldn't do good, give me good to do it, all the benefits and sun with the light on the one. Oh, I could use it, and I said, if you're going to find go the way, not a funny see the one who goes to like. Yeah, I got me, but I could see, coming in the bar, with me now with all the seal. Yeah, I got me, but I could see, coming in the bar, with me now with all the seal. Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Agile Uprising podcast. I'm your host, again, Jay Hersko. Back-to-back episodes today, 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. And with me, I have a murderer's row of miscreants, starting with Mr. Chris Merman.
Hi.
Mr. Andy Grossman, long-time listener, first-time caller. Abbott back again. We didn't scare Abbott the first time, so he came back. Abbott, welcome.
Not scared.
Mr. Mike Goodell.
Howdy, y'all.
And lastly, Mr. Andrew Leff.
What's up?
We're all here today. We are gathered here today to discuss an interesting topic. The question that was posed in Discord: is Agile a cult? And the answer, yes. Thanks everybody for listening. I want to thank all of you listeners for tuning in. Jordan.
Thanks for dragging us all onto this so that you could do a 30-second podcast.
That would have been great. There goes our listener count. So Merman, kick us off. Is it a cult? Do we need to define the difference between a cult and a religion? Where do you want to start?
I don't think that there is a difference, which is why I thought that the name of this podcast was ridiculous on its face. Like they're both the same thing, and that's not the point. But that's okay.
All right, I would take umbrage with that, but I'm going to kick it over to Mike Goodell. Difference between a cult and a religion. Is there one?
It's shades of gray, if you will. Cult commonly is associated with a group, presumably smaller in size, that is kind of new and attracted to a charismatic personality or idea, and is outside the norm, and kind of seen as extreme or weird, or pick your adjective. Whereas religion tends to bring the idea of a more full-throated, stable, mature kind of institution, so to speak. And for either to survive, the members have to figure out how to integrate into society and coexist. And if you don't, then you get like the Jamestown cult. Where they just couldn't coexist.
Leff, what are we missing?
I think, the spiritual guidance or the religious aspect of it is, what's our moral compass? And I think from an Agilist perspective, that helps us define our moral compass professionally and personally. If we're zealots, do we try and build a cult to define, doing it one way and one way only based upon one person's vision? Maybe that could be considered more cultish behavior, but I think the lines are blurred, right? I think there's the spiritual aspect of it, and then there's more of the, dominant, do it this way because, I am supreme kind of point of view.
Okay. So I pulled up a definition from yourdictionary.com on the difference of the general characteristics between a cult and a religion. So I'm going to start with you, Abbott. I'm going to read off what this website lists as the general characteristics of a modern cult. And I want you to tell me, does this kind of sound like Agile? The first bullet is, they rush you into joining and discourage or disallow questions. The second is, followers are encouraged to worship a specific manifesto author. No, I'm sorry, a specific group leader. Third, leaders dictate in great detail all aspects of the process. Followers' lives. Followers are personally monitored to ensure they're following the, I can't say that, guidelines. And methods of control are used to keep members close. Now, stepping back, Abbott, in the aggregate, based upon what I just said, does some of the behavior of Agile and some of these Agile initiatives match the definition of a cult?
I would say I've seen some of those behaviors in some of the Agile implementations I've been a part of, or at least come into. So, I mean, if we're just taking it at the yourdictionary.com version, then I guess there's a conversation to be had.
And by the way, thank you, Abby. Yourdictionary.com is not giving a sponsorship, but if they were to extend it, we would not be against. Left, based upon that definition I just gave, does that match? Does it jibe?
I think word to word, maybe. It depends. I'll give you the consultant answer. It depends.
Those of you keeping track at home, 8 minutes and 42 seconds into this episode, we got the first depends. Moving along.
But my question back to you, Jay, or to the panel is it bad to inspire cultish behavior when it comes to...
Hold that. We are going to get to that. That's one of the questions.
Can I just pause? Because
no, because I need to do the counterpoint of a religion, and then we're going to go into the details. So, Andy.
Yes.
Grammar.yourdictionary.com defines a religion as the group worships a higher source of power rather than a single person. There is a shared, sincere belief system. The main beliefs or principles on the manifesto are consistent with basic mainstream standards for human dignity. Appropriate forms of conduct between people are defined. An understanding of evil is established in project management. Oh, that must be a typo on that website. Especially how it impacts humans. There are sacred ritual acts. So if you were in a vacuum and I read that definition to you, and then you had to just solely compare it to your Agile experience, does the religion definition match?
First of all, the cults don't like to be called cults. They think they have a bad rep. They said they actually want to be called new religious movements. So even the cults don't like the word cult. But I think there's a certain amount of faith within Agile, but then there's also going to have to be some evidence along with it. You can only, worship the Scrum Guide so much, but if it's not delivering results to your team or to your company, then it's like, okay, you're eventually going to leave that cult if you can. Whereas the traditional definition of cults, well, maybe a spaceship will come and get us. I don't know, but you can't really prove that.
Right.
And also there was also a portion of extracting a certain amount of your income. That's also part of the cult. Anybody who's been in a training class, that's what happens.
Merman, you're itching to get going, so let's get going.
No, okay. Here's the thing that everybody's missing with this whole definition the reason why I said that religion and cult are the same thing is that people who think that things are bad, they call the others a cult, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, I would like to point out there is a quote that started this whole thing, which is what Jay always does, is that he takes something that I post and then he bastardizes it. And then he says, that's what we're going to do a podcast about. So in Daniel Pink's newest book about regrets, he quoted a French sociologist, and I'm not going to say the name because I'm going to misspeak it, but you can find it and we can place the quote if we really need to, but is that defining the feature of religious thought, and I'd argue many other belief systems, is, quote, the division of the world into two domains, one containing all that is sacred and all that is profane. We don't always agree on the boundaries between those two domains, but when we forsake what we believe is sacred for what we believe is profane, regret is the consequence. Now, I say all that to say, right, that what we believe is sacred, and if it doesn't fit into what we believe is sacred, we say that it's profane. There are countless examples, and in fact, the great thing about pop culture and also the great political divide and two worlds that we believe in, and that doesn't matter whichever side of whichever topic of whichever aisle that you want to do, says that what I believe is sacred and what you believe that is different from what I do is profane. And I would argue that that is absolutely where we argue, whatever we are arguing about, and right now, right, is like what we're doing is a cult. It depends on which side of the aisle you are on, because if you agree with me, then you are sacred, i.e. religion, right? Like everybody, and for the record, every conference that is devoted to a specific framework as opposed to the non, it feels absolutely like this, which is everybody that's here is sacred. And if you are not, you are the profane. And I will point to any post making fun of any framework falls into that argument.
Okay. So that's a very intelligent, well-reasoned statement. But I'm going to ask you this, Merman. I'm going to ask you this. One of the best developers I've ever worked with was a young guy by the name of Joel Dennis. Shout out to Joel. Joel, if you're listening and you ever need a job, call me. And he was a devout Jehovah's Witness. And we used to have really good conversations about religion because he was very, very open-minded, and we'd have great chats. And I asked him once, I said, Joel, what's the difference between a religion and a cult? And the way he defined it to me is, when you come to my church, I open the doors, I open the Bible. Anyone in that church can explain to you exactly why we believe what we believe and what we believe. He said, a cult, you have to pay to gather that knowledge. He said, and then he used the example of, the easy example, Scientology. He said, you can't walk in and get in touch with your inner Thetan, right? Xenu is not talking to you unless you're a OT level 7 Thetan. So with that definition, and let's call us on our bullshit, right? The shirts and certs game that we play. Does that help? Does that help support the argument that we can be a little cultish?
No. And so here's the problem. Here's the problem is that. So what your friend just stated, or the former engineer that you worked with, and so the assumption that he is making is that everybody in that church all believes the same thing.
Well,
and
no,
here's the
statement. No, and maybe I mistranslated what he said. The way he explained it to me is, when you're in a cult, you have to pay to get knowledge. You have to pay to be exposed to the teachings, to the principles. Whereas in a church, you walk in and you go up to the priest and you say, explain to me why you, Mr. Methodist, Mr. Seventh-day Adventist, Mr. Rosicrucian, why do you believe what you believe? And they'll tell you.
Well, Jay, you did send me a PayPal request for this podcast.
That's not supposed to be, not until the 40th minute. Come on.
All right, hold on. So here's the thing. Did anybody
PayPal me money?
Can we all? So the modern day example of a cult is what we would call. I'm sorry, that's my phone telling me that I need to take another snack. Anyways,
I thought it was going to tell you your blood pressure was getting high. I'm like, oh, how many times can we make that beep left?
Well, anyway, here's the thing. The modern day existence of what many would probably argue as a cult we would say is the Branch Davidians, David Koresh. Can we say that that's probably a modern day example of what many would consider a cult?
You're showing your age. You're showing your age. Nexium, maybe. Abbott's looking at you like, how old is this guy? Branch Davidians. They taught me that in grammar school.
No, well, so for the record.
Oh, and you are in Texas.
he just like the Nexium guy just argued that he just filed an argument that that his conviction should be thrown out because the things were gathered like the evidence was gathered incorrectly. A lot of this so regardless, like what I'm trying to say, what I'm saying is that, and for the record, that's not an old reference either. So
I think the modern day Republican Party is a better example.
Anyways, not a single person had to pay to be a member of the Branch Davidians, right?
True.
You did not have to pay to be a member of the Branch Davidians. Now, I would argue that members of that organization, they paid in things other than money, and I think we all know where we're going, and we don't need to go down that path, right? The difference in that argument states, oh, well, regardless of whether you pay or don't have to pay, and frankly, many of the religious organizations that wouldn't call themselves a cult, they talk about how the word tithe means tenth, and that's what it means when we say you have to give us 10% of your money or you're not a good member of the church, or going to heaven, or you're not a member of this church. Or like there are some churches that you bring your checkbook and it's audited regularly, and you would say, well, that's a cult. Nope, absolutely not. It is a religion. It's just a religion where they're like, hey, so again, I don't want to even get into that. That's why I think that a religion and a cult, it's a very fine line. Going back to my point of saying that when we forsake what we believe is sacred for what we believe is profane, regret is the consequence. Right? So
go get a snack before you fall over, because I want to pivot to left.
Now, okay. I just want to comment on that. We can't even get through 25 minutes of conversation without having a lot of triggering, right? Like we have all different points of view on this, and it's interesting, right? Like you asked a simple question and we have not been able to bottom line an answer. So, you know, do I think when my exposure to Agile as a coach, when I got introduced, did I look at the people that mentored me as cultish type leaders? I mean, I would have walked through burning buildings for these people because they showed me a better path I was seeking. So does that make me a follower, right? Does that make me a cult leader now that I have people that have been inspired by my words and wisdom?
Leader.
Yeah. Right. When does charisma turn into, you know, fanaticalism or something radical, right? So I think there's a lot. I think it blurs the lines. Going back to what we were talking about is how when does it become when do you become a zealot as opposed to when do you cross over?
Zealotry is invoked so many times. That's a great use of the word, Lef, is that zealotry is evoked so many times in positive and negative terms in everything you do.
But I also think, to your point, Merman, I'm going to give you credit where credit is due. Zealotry is truly the eye of the beholder, right? So if you're a heathen, if you're a believer, right? And I mean, let's get real, right? Christianity started as a cult. They were trying to stamp it out. The problem is it was an idea virus that ran away, and then it became the dominant modern religion. So most religions start as cults? And if we are saying that, is it so bad that Agile starts as a cult?
It's certainly dominant in the United States. I would argue that there are other parts of the world that.
Oh, well, it's not the dominant world religion. That's Islam, but
Islam.
But
Muslim.
in I can't even say pre-modern. What is that? Historic times, like ancient civilizations. You know, it went from paganism to Judaism to Christianity, which was the cult that wouldn't go away, and it ended up subsuming parts of the government and.
The original modern society that started them all, which is the Roman empire, they said, "Hey, we got them all." And the notion, and frankly, that I don't know if depending on your timeline, right? Like Mayan culture. Right, one of the original cultures as well, right? Mayan cultures had many gods. So this monotheistic way of thinking is actually late to the game, because the original cultures believed, hey, we believe in all of them. We believe in whoever benefits us right now, which points out just how wonderfully messed up as a species we humans are. I'll believe whatever I need to believe in order to get me by.
Let's tie this back into the basis of the conversation.
Before you tie that in, I just want to say, in the odd chance that he is listening, Yuval Harari, please call us. We want you to come on the show. But anyway, Lef, continue.
No, I was just going to bring us back into, kind of the parallel between religious, cult, and Agile. You could tie it back to the holy wars of internal organizations, waterfall versus Agile, change, fixed mindset versus growth mindset. I mean, I think a lot of these parallels play true, and I think it's how you interpret the
scaling.
Well, yeah. It's how you handle the data, right? does it turn into a cult when you abuse the data in a certain way? Or is it more of a religious movement when you're inspired by the data to continue to drive and innovate? I mean, or is one evil, is one good? I don't know. Again, I think it really depends on how you utilize the data that is inspiring you to do something different. I'd love to hear other voices besides
the stories.
Yeah.
Sure.
What do you think, Andy?
So, I'm looking at it from an agile perspective, but I spent some time in sales and marketing, and they have the exact same thing where it's like you have to subscribe to this sales process and this only person. You have to go to a seminar, you have to get a certification, you have to do this. So I see a lot of parallels in it. I think if you're looking for a straight answer, I think we are a cult, and it may not be bad. Maybe we're culture, out of there, but religion, okay, that's going a little bit far. But we have several charismatic leaders that we provide portions of our income to, and I just think if somebody does leave the agile cult, I don't believe they're shunned like some of the new religious movements. Like I'll still talk to waterfall folks. I was on a plane with somebody who, you start, when we used to go on planes, you start talking to them, and then I realized that they managed a PMO and and they were in the waterfall thing. And I'm like, this is going to be a really uncomfortable flight. But by the end of it, I think we sort of saw where each other was coming from, because I couldn't get away,
Because I couldn't get away. I think you just gave Lef and I our new business model. We're going to do agile deprogramming. Agile deprogramming.
I thought you were going to say agile on a plane.
Yeah, right. So Abbott, what do you think? I think I honestly think the only way this episode would truly work and get to the root would be we would have to have a 6-hour semantic argument on the true definition of cult and the true definition of religion. But based upon your experience, Abbott, right? Like, do we as coaches sometimes get a little bit preachy and a little bit too all hail Hypnotoad, all hail Hypnotoad? Like, do we do that?
I mean, isn't the role of the word coach, you're kind of asking to lead people. And I feel like it mimics a lot of behaviors you see within a cult. But to me, Agile is a tool. It's a set of tools. I think it gets maybe idolized in a way. There's some idolatry that turns it into a following, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I guess you'd have to ask the goals of Agile to really get there. But I don't know. It's complex, and I agree. We could spend 6 hours on it. But I do see some of those characteristics.
So I kind of think if anybody's going to blame Agile for being cults, kind of our fault. And we, the royal we, right? Because when you think about it, right, when there's that you've all seen the Satir curve of change. Well, there's a change. There's a curve that we all go through in maturity, right? Where when we first find this new thing, we think it's the greatest thing in the world, and we want to tell everybody about it. This is how you got to do it. This is how you got to do it. This is how you got to do it, right? And we preach. And then we get our teeth kicked in once or twice, bad transformation, try to coach somebody, they tell you to go basically toss yourself off, to go defenestrate yourself, right? So then you end up in that trough of despair where you're like, this is all bullshit. It doesn't work. What am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? And then you rise back up to that level playing field where you're like, look, not to sound like Whitey Ford, but or Lou Gehrig, whoever the guy that was fucking quotable from the Yankees, it either works or it doesn't, right? And you could tell a true
Yogi Berra.
Yogi Berra.
You're not even correct there.
Yeah, I couldn't name Joe DiMaggio, but whatever. Predictions hard, especially about the future. But it's
all good until it isn't,
Exactly.
He had hundreds of those.
Jesus, we're not even drinking. But you reach that point where you kind of realize that some of this stuff works and some of the stuff doesn't, and you just kind of gotta. It's more art than science. And I think to your point, Abbott, in those early days when we're learning, that's when we could be the most like scrum zealotry, right? Like if I read one more article that tells me the reason why you think Scrum doesn't work is because you weren't doing it right. If I had $1 for every article I read by that, I'd be retired.
So can I pivot and ask you a question, Jay? I think that I was actually thinking this right when you said that whole wrong and right kind of a thing, is that we have gotten to the point, and probably we were a decade ago, and maybe I just wasn't as aware of it a decade ago, or even 15 years ago, maybe. I don't know. All I know is my experience is that I think all of our journeys started with this is right and this is wrong. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. We all started with taking a test on something. Maybe your Agile journey started before you took a cert exam. Mine did, but like, I know that this is right and this is wrong, and that has set us up for this point. Certs is what started this whole thing, is that's the right answer and this is the wrong answer, even though can't think of the last one of the, we've all taken a cert test where we're like, that's not the right answer. Like there's more than one right answer to that. And that in and of itself is really where we are on this topic is there even such a thing as a right and wrong answer? Well, maybe there's bunches of rights and there's very few wrongs. And even the ones that we've stated, I mean, I'm 2 months into my new job as leading a transformation, and I'm like, there's very few wrong answers, and even the ones that I thought were wrong answers, I've even had to be like, okay, fine, whatever. You know what I mean? Like it's because it's humans, and we're all standing here. We're in this position because we were told this is right and this is wrong, and somewhere along the way we were like, is it? I don't know, is it?
Chris, you're reminding me of Jay's favorite quote.
Don't give him credit for anything.
Jay? Well, we're fighting biology.
Yeah. So it's right or it's wrong. There's this inherent human binary bias, and we get comfort from knowing that feeling confident something's right or wrong, especially when our experience and knowledge, or for whatever reason, leaves us a little uncertain. But I want to, if I can, kind of tag back off of something Abbott said a second ago, and that it's the culture, religion, whatever. This is really we're dealing with human beings, and there's really just human beings and how we choose to engage with human beings and our fellow human beings. And by saying it's right or it's wrong really does us a disservice. So, the kind of cliche, meet people where they are, really, beyond the cliche part of it, there's a lot of truth to it. And in my own journey, what I've experienced is when people try to feel the need to do something the right way, they're kind of shutting off their brain. And we get better results when we engage our own brains.
And I think to that point, Mike, as we grow and mature, even on our own journeys and our own roles, it's a lot like the experience I think a lot of people have with religion, where as they get older, they start to question more and more. And they start to consistently ask the question, am I right? Am I wrong? Do I need to be recentered? Am I looking at things from a blindered point of view? And I think there's a lot of parallels there. I mean, it's the traditional, what is it? The redemption arc of a story where, you're born and you're baptized and you go christening, confirmation, the whole nine. And then eventually you leave it all behind. And then eventually you find it later in life because it makes sense to you. Maybe we're all kind of going through that, to turn the mirror back on us. Maybe we're all kind of going through that journey. We're all at different
steps. Did you just misquote the heroic journey that is foundational to all storytelling?
I don't know. What is that? The 5 steps, the exposition, resolution? No, I was talking about the redemption arc, where everybody loves when the bad guy becomes
redemption is part of the hero's journey.
All right. Let's not go down the rabbit hole. Let's not go down.
I'm sorry.
We started that. At the beginning, but whatever.
That could be another show.
Yeah, but I do think that something you're touching on, Jay, and something we're all alluding to, and Mike and I share a very similar brain when it comes to the people aspect of things. I think it's, when I think cult, I don't think of reflection. When I think of how we approach change, right? Tapping the collective wisdom of people is the reflection. We become mirrors of lots of things, and we're more reflective, and we're more, as we mature, we're able to receive that reflection differently, right? We're able to introspect, and not only outwardly retrospect, but inward, right? And how we need to work and change and hear different, right? Listen differently, consume data differently. So I think there is something there, right? So I don't know why that just popped in my head, as far as we become more reflective, does it become less of cultish behavior?
I think you're right. Andy?
Something Left just said is basically bringing up, I hear this from a lot of different people, like, I'm over this team, or I'm going to go in, I'm going to show them what to do. So if you're coaching like a little league team, you're not going to say, well, just run the bases, whatever you feel like, and swing the ball. There's some fundamentals, but there's got to be some flexibility within it. And I bristle at the people who are really rigid, like, well, we'll just go in there and we'll tell them what they're doing wrong. Okay, well, let's understand, maybe they're doing something that works for them. Maybe it's their own mini cult within a cult. I don't know.
A phrase that I hear a lot.
Maybe there's
Andy,
something in the environment.
Let's show them what good. Really, Mike?
What do you say?
Go ahead.
I missed that. There was two
I don't know. Two bald men.
I was going to say, kind of along the lines of what Andy was saying. It's possible there's some, when a person goes and says, I'm going to show them what for and how to, set them straight.
We'll show them what good looks like.
Those people are, we'll show them what good looks like. Yeah, that's a polite way of saying I'm going to go, stick it to them.
Do it my way.
Those human beings, those human beings are reacting in a rational way for this condition that they're in. There's typically something around in the environment around them that's causing them to react that way. So, where it's kind of like, where you're going in and you're saying, you must do this differently. You're pushing against a force that may be an immovable object. So, and that's where some of the conflict and the perception of being cult-like or having religious fervor sometimes, I think, can come from. So I'm sorry, Chris, you were going to say, guy with a haircut like that, you got to have something to say.
I was just saying what you, like, Andy pointed out that there's this notion of, just like you said, there's this, if we do this, then they'll do it, right? Which is exactly what a prospective cult leader would say, is that, all I got to do is tell them what to do, and then they'll just totally do it, right? Isn't that a phrase that we've heard them before? Like, let's just show them what good looks like, and hey, everybody, stand-ups will magically be less than 15 minutes now, as if doing a 16-minute stand-up is a bad one.
Right, and 14 minutes.
How well does that work out?
But I also, the idea of cult religion, either or, it's not necessarily the worst thing, because as humans, we gravitate towards the idea of hierarchy, right? Again, here we go with biology. It's what made us the dominant species on this planet is our ability to collaborate and coordinate in groups and be able to pass history and knowledge down through some sort of communication, right? That's what made us, the dominant species on the planet. I wouldn't say the smartest, because I think octopuses and dolphins are smarter than us. They're definitely smarter than mermen. But I there was a shot. But
not on land.
Not on land. Good point. Merman is definitely outmatching the octopus in the middle of his Texas face.
Are we sure about that? I do live in Texas.
But I kind of think it is natural for us to look up to try and find someone, like either inspiration or guidance, or like Merman, kind of snarkily said, modeling the behavior. It's a normal human thing. So I guess the hope would be that you find the most positive manifestation of what you're looking to model, because we look for hierarchy. That's why I really think all these totally flat organizational, things, they could be a bit cultish, right? If we're going to start throwing arrows, because we need hierarchy. We're humans. That's what we do. Merman?
Yeah, so when Lef was talking about this idea of storylines and right and wrong, sense of humor, right? Like we get this notion of can I have a healthy sense of humor about this? And the people that we would probably say in our community that might be a little more on the cultish side,
good point,
they stop having a sense of humor about, they stop being like we all that person that we try to make like I know Jay's done it, and is you kind of have like a snarky answer to someone on LinkedIn, just trying to have fun with it. Like, I'm not making fun of you. I'm not saying you're stupid. I'm not saying, like, let's just have fun with it. And they totally respond with like, I'm not playing. And to the point that Jay, you were just saying about like something triggered in my head about like a story. We have these metrics of success of things like a framework or a transformation. Someone said earlier about like a bad transformation. Like, is there such thing as a good transformation? I haven't seen one. But this idea of we have this metric of success and we are going to hold on to that thing. Like the study that I wrote I read this study about transformations during the pandemic, and basically what it alluded to is the fact that like all metrics of success or transformation are made up, for lack of a better way to put it. It's fucking made up. All of these things. Now, granted, that one company did that one thing that one time that worked. My very first conference presentation, I used metrics on a transformation that I did, and I quoted them as if they were taken from, Ezekiel. You know what I mean? Like as if it's
Ezekiel
23:20.
Which one?
Gosh dang it! I'm so mad at
So
you that
go
you put that
Fiction
book of the Bible in my head. I'm just trying to say that, like, we say
right.
that, well, this happened this one time, so it must always be true, when it's never the case. It's never always true.
We are definitely victims of confirmation bias, where we point to the examples where it worked and say that's how it should, forgetting the fact that the world is way too complex. And being as the six of us, we represent the entire Agile community. I would like to make the motion that going forward,
six white dudes,
a successful transformation is referred to as an Autobot, and an unsuccessful transformation referred to as a Decepticon. So like when Lef calls me up and said, hey, have you ever know anybody that worked at company X? I hear they're going through a transformation. Yo, dude, it's a Decepticon. Don't go anywhere near it. Like, that's going to be our code word for now on for bad transformations. So the question then becomes, has anybody ever worked on an Autobot?
Nobody's following me down this path, Jay.
I am going to pivot real quick because I want to say something to like, Merm, what you were saying that I feel like it gets back to one of the original questions about whether or not the cult-like behavior of Agile, is it good or bad? I mean, I could say for sure the way you kind of tie back the inflexibility of some Agile practices and implementation versus and how cults are often like inflexible structures. Like, to me, that's a very bad thing for Agile. Like I don't think we've talked a lot about like cult bad. Like, is it a bad thing for Agile to be cultish? I think that to me stands out as like a very, like, I don't think it was ever thought of so that it couldn't change or evolve. So
how about every single one ends in everybody dying dramatically?
Well, how about we look at it like this too? Like, we start out as trying to inspire a movement, right? A movement. And then when does that movement turn into that cultish behavior where we're so stuck within a very fixed mindset that movement lost its essence of trying to inspire something different? And I would say from your Autobot to Decepticon type of mentality, every transformation is successful. You are starting that journey. Whether you achieve the goal you set out to do, you are transforming. Whether you're succeeding in the goals that inspired that action, that's, to me, different, right? But if you are taking, like, how do you describe, you're changing. So that's success within itself, right? You've achieved change. Now, how you handle the data coming out of that change, and does it align? Have you actually planned the goals that you're trying to achieve by going through to me, I'll put a real hardcore statement out there. If you're not in a constant state of transformation, you're not going to be around. Like the way the world moves, as fast as it moves, if you cannot funnel change and be able to goal set based upon the amount of change we occur, maybe I'm a cult leader at this point, because that's truly, what I believe.
I don't think
we're going to change Les' name to Glasses Half Full, because that's all that was.
I don't know. Andy, were you in Content Club this past week where we talked about the order of time and how everything in our world is not a thing, but an event? Because every single concept we have is in a constant state of change. We're in a constant state of entropy. Everything, even things that look monotonous from the outside, right? Left's glasses, the Rocky Mountains, right? Long enough timeline, they look monotonous, but they eventually will break down via entropy into smaller pieces. So you're right. No one is at a state of is. Everyone is at a state of becoming. And I want to touch on something. I think Merman was talking. I kind of made me think about it. We all came to this agile chicanery because it was exposed to us, and we realized that, oh wow, this does make sense, and this is a different. We look to that cult leader because it just made sense, and this is a different way of working that works. So if we had to pass on, and I'm going to start with you, Merman, if you had to pass on a word of advice to a young practitioner or a practitioner who's new to the fold, who's starting to get into this agile stuff, how do they avoid becoming the David Koresh of Scrum? Like, how do they call back to the branch Davidians? How do they, or if you were even presenting with your younger self, right? Back when you had hair, what would you say to yourself to help that person avoid going down the path of the cult and the zealotry? Oh, I think I broke Merman.
I mean, if you don't want to be David Koresh, just understand that under 18 is a bad thing. Like, maybe you should just stick to above a certain age if you want to. I don't know that everybody in our community believes that's a rule, but I would strongly encourage you to use that rule. I mean, honestly, I think I could have accomplished so much more in my 30s if I had gotten past this mental block I had that there was a binary answer to things. I know I mentioned it probably a couple of times already. Like, there are very few wrong answers for an organization, and I wish it wouldn't have taken me so long to figure that out. Just start embracing different right answers, because if you teach people their wrong answers to life, then you're basically continuing on this notion of there's a binary way of looking at things, and that's just, we're worse off as people when that happens. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. I'm going to ask Andy, I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
And then I'm going to go to Abbott for the response. The reason why we're having this conversation is because the idea of agile and agility has reached an age of maturity where we're kind of starting to question, right? We're starting to look back and wonder. The fact that this dialogue even exists shows that there have been some missteps in the past, and even maybe there are some missteps continuously occurring. Do you think it has reached the point where we need to jettison the cult of agile entirely and define a new way of working for us?
It's an interesting question. I go back to my marketing days in terms of like a product life cycle. Where are we in this curve? You're introducing a product. iPhone's awesome. It's 2008, 2009. That's great. Okay, you're going up the curve. What do you do to keep it fresh, or what do you do to kind of get more people who aren't in the cult? Like, I could have the same conversation probably about 15 years ago with my waterfall folks on a waterfall podcast, if the waterfall podcast exists, saying, why are those agile people so culty, or why, so it really depends on where your vantage point is. So it's a long way of saying, no, I think agile is still there. But if I were to give advice to my younger self, I'd say, hold tight to the principles of agile, but the practices, watch and don't back up the agile truck on a team or a transformation, or it's not it's not going to work. If I tell you to do 86 behavior changes and you have to do it within 3 months, ooh, that's a lot. Let's pick one thing.
Okay. So
and
Abbott,
get really
regardless,
good at it.
Regardless if you
Okay.
agree or not, I'm going to ask you to give the counterpoint. We do need to get away from Agile, and it is a cult. So if you were on the stand and had to make that argument, how would you make that argument?
Well, I get the hard one, right?
This truly is a hard one. So yeah, listeners, you're not watching the face of abject terror in this video right now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would, argue for the reasons to get away from Agile would be to get away from trying to say that there is one way to do it right and Agile's the way to do it. It's, a closed-minded position. And I would say, as long as there's something you're moving toward that helps you reach really the overarching goal of whatever you're looking to achieve, if it's, a product launch or some sort of business goal, and Agile for some reason or another doesn't work for the people who are working in that framework, then yeah, move away from it if it doesn't fulfill those needs. So yeah, I would say like the inflexibility of it is what I would move away from, and keeping an open mind. Hopefully that answers your question.
No, you did. You did a good job. I threw you on the hot seat.
Can I plus one to what Abbott said by saying
yes, and then I'm going to left.
Can we agree on when we say, for most people, when they hear Agile, they just replace it with the name of the framework that they use? I think most of the problems that we have are because people bought into a framework or frameworks, right? Mm-hmm. Because A, their job required it, or B, that's how I got into Agile by Scrum. I didn't get into Agile just by saying, ooh, tell me about this touchy-feely sort of set of principles. And I was introduced to Agile through Scrum. And then Agile through this, through that framework. Like, frameworks are the reason why we've become cultists. Can we just say that? We are all cultish, and it's because of frameworks. So yep. I agree with absolutely what Abbott's saying when you put Agile in the reference of a framework.
What was Peter Merrill's one-liner, Mike? Shout out to Peter Merrill. We're all either charlatans or we aren't. Was that his one-liner?
Yep.
I literally quoted a statement saying the exact same thing that you keep skipping over, and then you quoted something saying the exact same thing.
Because I know all the other references. So, Lef, I'm going to ask you this: how, if you run into somebody who's you run into the young Mike Cadell, right? Or the young Mike Cadell.
God help you.
Back when that hair.
Back when there was no electricity. So you run into the young Mike Cadell, and he just discovered this Agile thing, and he's all excited. Right. And he's going to fall into that zealot behavior, because we all do. What would you offer as a way, or plant a seed in that young Mike Cadell's mind, or our listeners' minds? How would you suggest they prevent falling into the cult of the manifesto, we should call it?
So what keeps popping in my head is, all of you are talking about Agile in a certain way. My advice would be, Agile's not a delivery mechanism. It's not an instrument for delivery. It is, to me, a way to organize your thoughts, read data, and understand how to make people the focus, and not develop, in the book, in one of the books we just reviewed, right? So seeing people as humans instead of instruments for delivering things, right? So to me, Agile it could be cultish in that way, right? We're trying to touch a heart, open a mind. With that being said, utilizing frameworks, waterfall, Scrum, Kanban, whatever, to deliver what we're trying to achieve. So Agile, to me, is the foundation of the thinking and the way to interpret data to make informed decisions, whether we need to use Scrum. We need to iterate our software development, or we need to use Kanban because we need to look at our systems and visualize the work differently. Or we need heavy project management, right? Six Sigma, we need to limit amount of defects coming out of our systems to ensure highest quality due to whatever. I think there's value in all of it. And I think the Agile, to me, Agile helps you be able to review, reflect, and understand all those things with an open mind and be able to navigate through them. You know, plot the stars. I like to use the metaphor, we are tour guides, not travel agents, right? We're with you along the journey and we're pointing out certain things for you to see, as opposed to planning your journey for you and telling you each date you got to be here by this time to go witness this.
I've used that statement, by the way. Hold on, Mervin. I've used that statement, "We're tour guides, not travel agents," in every successful job interview I've ever had. So thank you, Lef. I owe you some sort of royalties.
I totally steal from Lef at least once a week. I would argue to Lef's point that you could have an agile mindset and use waterfall as a framework and be just as successful.
Yes, I would agree.
It's not about the framework. We have got to stop putting in, Lef put in the chat earlier this idea of like war being evoked. Like, we're like, cultish people are always trying to start a war with somebody. Like, think about all these wars that are being started. There's the war on, we can joke all we want about the war on Christmas. Like they're the people that are feeling offended are the ones starting the war. Right. So if we're wanting to not be cultish, we need to stop picking fights with people, which is why I would argue that the biggest cultish thing about the Agile community today is we are always looking to pick a fight with the royal we. If you look, LinkedIn, Agile LinkedIn and Twitter is literally just a series of fights. That is
LinkedIn is just intellectual buffoonery. Yeah.
Twitter's no better. It is. Every now and then I wade back into Twitter just to see what's up. And I swear to God, I wrote a post years ago about is Twitter ruining Agile, and it has. Social media has ruined.
Social media has ruined a lot more than Agile.
It has ruined the Agile mindset. So if we want to talk about what has made Agile a cult, it is frameworks and it is social media. Those are the two things. So if we want to stop being a cult, we got to stop doing both of those stupid things.
There's definitely a discussion for an alpha bozo, but I don't feel like going down that path this late.
I thought that was my name on Discord, Agile bozo.
Craig Larman, I think, says it best, and we'll close out with this, right? He says that a lot of times Agile practitioners approach the waterfall people and tell them what they were doing is wrong. What they're doing is wrong. And his argument was, and I'm so excited for you to take this course, Mike Cadell. I think you're really going to enjoy it. He said we need to stop telling people that what they're doing is wrong, because waterfall is not wrong. Waterfall is incongruent to the goals we are trying to reach. Those goals being the ability to adapt and change and absorb feedback and pivot. Waterfall is not incongruent with that way of working. That's really what it sums up to. All right, so we're at time, gentlemen. I'm going to go around the horn real quick. You got 45 seconds to give final thoughts, and I'll hit the mute button. And Lef, you get to go first.
Yeah, so this was a great topic. I really enjoyed speaking about this, and my only thing that's popping into my head is if we think of Agile versus waterfall is like a bus going from Pennsylvania to California with no stops. Right, it's a very direct shot. Right, we got to put a lot of people on it. Agile, we're going through the stops and we're learning along the way. So I think there's something to be said for how we learn as people, as individuals, and as organizations. That to me is kind of, if that's a cult, then sign me up, because I'm all in on that.
All right, Andy.
So I got really excited that somebody, one of the big Agile luminaries was going to give a talk, and it basically said, okay, this company was doing really bad. We brought in X framework and they're awesome now. And I was like, wait a minute. I'm going to need more details. You yada yada over the best part. But I'm just...
It's a Seinfeld episode. Seinfeld Agile.
Yeah, it was like a bad Seinfeld episode. So I guess just getting into the details, and that's where I can convince you that if you go 1 to 10, you'll implement X framework. But will your people be happy? Will your customers be happy? Will you still have the right mindset? So can't tell if we solved the problem or if we just, exacerbated it.
All right. I just had a mental picture real quick of the booth at Monk's with Merman looking at Mike Cadell, and Mike says to Merman, "Did they yada yada the transformation?" And Merman goes, "Yeah, they yada yada the transformation. We started yada yada yada, and boom, we were agile." So final thoughts, Mr. Cadell.
Remember, we're dealing with human beings. We're not dealing with inanimate objects and just processes, individuals and interactions. Is the beginning. And kind of going back to the rather painful thought earlier of what would I tell a young Mike Cadell, if I could see that far back, is to stay curious and stay humble. If we stay curious and we stay humble, then we will not only be less cult-like or dogmatic, but we might actually help our clients and help our customers and help our people and have fun doing it. So,
okay, Abbott.
I don't really have much of a final thought. I feel like this is such a good discussion, so I'm glad I could join. I think that Agile is, like everyone has said, about the people, and don't get too stuck in doing things a certain way if it's not going to work for what you're trying to get done. And yeah, I think being curious and open-minded and how you practice Agile is the important part.
Okay. And Merman, take us home.
I thought you were. It would have been hilarious if you had just completely skipped over me.
I didn't even think of that.
Would have been awesome. I would like to go back to the quote that I read from Daniel Pink's amazing new book, The Power of Regret. If you haven't read it, it's totally worth it. But it's when we forsake what we believe is sacred for what we believe is profane, regret is the consequence. I think it's really important for us to have regrets and to look back and say, I mean, it's in the Agile Manifesto, and the principles is the power of regret. I don't believe that we have looked back with enough regret on what we've done and what our industry has wrought on people, like what Agile has done to product management, what Agile has done to program management and project managers. The fact that people are afraid to say that they're a project manager on LinkedIn because of what the Agile community has done to them is absolutely abhorrent. I think that for all their faults, the manifesto creators have stated that we are not deities and this is not scripture. And we need to stop treating it as such. The Scrum Guide is not scripture. It keeps getting it. They keep changing it as well. Like, we need to have more regrets about what we've done. I feel Perry, who we all love on the Discord, is a reformed project manager, he always says. And I feel so sad for him because there's times that he stated, like, man, I wish I'd have done this differently or that. And like, there's nothing wrong with project managers that want to stay project managers and be a part of the Agile community. Like, we need to stop treating people this way. Like, that's just stupid what we've done.
Stop being a bully. Stop being a bully.
Stop being an asshole to people, everybody. And you know who I'm talking to. I've called you out on LinkedIn. I've called you out on Twitter. So if I haven't called you out, I should have, because I've been an asshole to people, and so have you.
Yeah, and we will end it with that. So everybody, once again, I want to thank Andrew, Abbott, Andy, Mike, and Merman for joining me this evening to unpack this topic. On behalf of all of us, I want to thank all of you for listening. Tune in next week where we compare Agile to the various major political movements throughout human history. And we start to decide which one is Agile, guaranteed to get us all canceled in the first 45 seconds. So in all seriousness,
for geofascism,
anarcho-capitalism based upon Warhammer 30K. So once again, we're committed to being free. We've got a Patreon. If you want to chip in, that's great. If not, don't worry about it. We are doing a quarterly prize giveaway. We've given out socks next month, I believe is going. I can't say that. So there is going to be a gift next month. Join the conversation on Discord. That's how Abbott found us. The poor guy's been subjected to Mike Cadell twice now. I don't know how he's gonna survive. But keep the conversation going. And lastly, I want to thank Machine Man Records and Krebs for giving us our outro music free of charge. Someday we will monetize that YouTube channel. So once again, I want to thank everybody for attending. Thank everybody for listening. And until next time, this is the Agile Uprising podcast signing out.